At exactly 8:06 p.m. on a night designed to celebrate her father's greatness, Indigo Jordan, 24, made a mistake she would never forget. The ballroom shimmered in gold and crystal, filled with the city's elite. Her dress clung nervously to her frame as she weaved between servers and socialites, carrying two glasses of wine. One slip, one tremble in her wrist, and deep red liquid splashed across the marble floor, right in front of Martin Jordan. The music didn't stop, but the air shifted. Eyes turned, and then came the sound no one expected, the sharp, echoing slap across Indigo's cheek. Her head jerked sideways, her lips split, and blood kissed the hem of her dress. Martin's voice cracked through the stunned silence, louder than the jazz band behind him. "Useless girl, get out." No one moved. Not even her older brother Cole, standing nearby in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, eyes locked on the floor as if pretending none of it was real. Indigo's vision blurred, not from the pain, but from the hot sting of shame swelling in her throat. Her father adjusted his tie and turned back to the stage like nothing had happened. The crowd did the same. That was the part that broke her the most, the collective decision to move on, to pretend. She ran. Out the side doors, through the freezing alley, into the night that suddenly felt colder than any December before. When she reached the car, her phone buzzed. 53 missed calls, but not a single one from the man who hit her. Not even a text from her brother. No one had followed. No one had asked if she was okay. That slap was not the beginning. It was the moment the curtain dropped on a lifetime of rehearsed lies. And now, for the first time in 24 years, Indigo knew. If she did not speak, no one ever would. If this moment made your chest tighten, follow Indigo's story. This is only the beginning. When Indigo got home that night, her cheek still stinging and her heart hollow, the silence in her apartment was suffocating. She stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the floor as if she might see an outline of herself from before the slap. The mirror caught her reflection, blood dried at the corner of her mouth, mascara like ink stains beneath her eyes, and something new in her gaze. Fury. She grabbed a wet cloth to clean her face, but her hand trembled. Not from weakness, from restraint. Every second since that slap, she had been clenching something inside her that had no name yet. It was too big to be sadness, and too loud to be fear. It was the sound of a dam breaking. She wandered into her mother's old study, untouched since her funeral 5 years earlier. The room had a quiet kind of grief to it. Dust on the books, an old perfume lingering in the air. Indigo had always avoided this room, afraid it might crack her open. But now, something pulled her to the desk. She opened a drawer. Inside was a green journal bound in ribbon, her mother's name etched inside the cover. She flipped through the pages, expecting gardening notes or recipes. Instead, she found entries that started with, "He told me I was imagining it again," and "I wish someone believed me." Each word a quiet scream across time. Her mother had documented every incident, every moment of manipulation, gaslighting, emotional abuse, isolation. And suddenly, Indigo saw it. The slap wasn't an explosion. It was a pattern, passed down, hidden behind charity galas and smiling Christmas cards. She turned another page and found a photograph taped to the back. Her mother with a woman Indigo had never met, arms around each other, smiling wide in the sun. On the back, to V, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would." Indigo whispered aloud, "Who are you?" And in that moment, she wasn't just angry. She was awake. If you've ever uncovered a truth that changed everything, comment yes and subscribe to the channel. Indigo's story is just getting started. What she finds next will shake everything. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a legacy she was about to burn. The woman in the photo haunted Indigo for days. Her mother's journal had cracked something wide open, but that smiling stranger, V, was a thread she could not ignore. A few Google searches led nowhere, but a yellowed envelope buried inside the journal's final pages held a single return address: Violet Jordan, New Hampshire. A name that had never been mentioned at home. Indigo booked a bus ticket the next day. If this woman had once seen her mother when no one else did, maybe she could see Indigo too. Violet opened the door wearing a faded sweatshirt and eyes that had clearly seen too much. She didn't flinch at the bruise on Indigo's face. She just nodded and said, "He finally hit you where people could see, didn't he?" The words didn't sting. They steadied her. Inside the house, there were no portraits, no silver-framed accolades, no trace of the Jordan legacy, just books, plants, and peace. They sat at the kitchen table while the kettle screamed, and Indigo finally asked the question that had been rotting in her gut. "Why did he erase you?" Violet took a breath. "Because I told the truth." Over the next few hours, Violet shared what the rest of the family buried. Martin had used silence as a weapon for decades, threatening, isolating, and blackmailing anyone who questioned him. Indigo's mother had tried to leave once. Violet had helped her. But Martin intervened, forced a psychiatric evaluation, and painted Violet as mentally unstable. It worked. She was disowned, discredited, and vanished from family history. But she never stopped documenting. From a closet in the guest room, Violet pulled out boxes, meticulously labeled NDAs, medical reports, survivor letters. Names Indigo didn't recognize, stories she'd never heard. It wasn't just family, it was interns, assistants, even tenants from Martin's rental properties. And every story had the same arc: silence, shame, and a payoff to disappear. Indigo's hands shook as she held the weight of it all. This wasn't about a slap. It was about a man who had built an empire out of silencing women, and a family that let him. But not anymore. This time, someone was listening, and this time, someone was ready to speak. Indigo didn't just find an aunt, she found her first ally in a war she didn't even know she'd inherited. Indigo returned to the city with a new kind of armor. The bruises on her face had faded, but the fire inside her had not. In her bag were copies of Violet's documents. Cold, damning, undeniable proof. She did not want revenge. She wanted the truth to have a voice, even if it shook the walls of everything she had once called home. A week later, she received a call from her father's office. Martin Jordan requested a private meeting at the family penthouse. "Just to clear the air," his assistant said. Indigo agreed. Not because she expected peace, but because she wanted to see the performance up close. The room was spotless, arranged like a stage. Martin sat by the fireplace in his tailored suit, sipping whiskey. Cole was already there, silent and stiff, his jaw clenched tight. On the table was a slim envelope and a contract clipped inside. "I know you're upset," Martin began, voice like honeyed steel. "But dragging this family through the mud helps no one. Let's be civil. Sign this, take the fund transfer, and move forward." Indigo didn't touch the paper. She looked at her brother. "You knew," she said quietly. He didn't deny it, didn't even blink, just stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Martin stood. "Indigo, this is not about guilt. This is about preservation. Your mother had her issues. You're becoming just like her. Dramatic. Dangerous." Indigo felt her breath catch, but not from fear. From the realization that he truly believed it. He had rewritten every truth in this family's story, and now he was trying to write hers too. She stood tall. "If you built your empire by erasing people, I'm here to rewrite the record." Her voice didn't shake. She walked to the door, but paused. "You raised me to never embarrass the family. I'm done honoring that silence." She walked out without the envelope, without her brother, and without the weight of his name. But with every step she carried something sharper, her voice. And for the first time, it felt louder than his. This was not a negotiation. This was the beginning of the unraveling, and Indigo had just pulled the first thread. Indigo knew that silence had always been her family's favorite disguise, but now she was ready to rip the mask off in front of the world. With Violet's help, she began assembling the story like a puzzle. The dates, the names, the evidence, the victims. She reached out to two of the women listed in the survivor letters. One, a former assistant named Betrayal, cried the moment Indigo introduced herself. "You're his daughter? And you believe me?" Indigo nodded, not just with empathy, but with purpose. Brielle handed over her signed NDA, along with old voicemails and hidden texts Martin had sent in the dead of night. Another woman, a former tenant named Karina, had medical records that matched the timeline of an eviction after she reported harassment. The stories weren't similar. They were nearly identical. Indigo's phone became a map of receipts, images, recordings. Violet coached her through every step, carefully redacting where necessary, creating timelines, matching Martin's business deals to patterns of cover-ups. Cole remained silent, and Martin sent nothing but a single message. "Think carefully." But Indigo was done thinking. She was ready to let the world decide what mattered. She worked with a small, independent journalist named Malia, who had spent years trying to break a story on Martin but lacked the sources. With Indigo's files, everything changed. The night of Martin's annual gala arrived, a tradition soaked in champagne, charity, and choreographed praise. Indigo did not attend. Instead, at 8:06 p.m., the exact moment of her public slap 1 year earlier, she pressed publish on the exposé. Within 20 minutes, it was trending. Headlines read, "Real Estate King or Master Manipulator? The Hidden Crimes of Martin Jordan." Screens inside the gala lit up with news alerts. Donors whispered. Faces paled. Phones rang. And for the first time, Martin couldn't rewrite the narrative. At home, Indigo sat beside Violet, watching the chaos unfold, not with satisfaction, but with stillness. Justice wasn't loud. Sometimes it was a quiet truth set free at the perfect time. And Indigo had just made sure the truth had nowhere left to hide. She didn't just break the silence, she detonated it. The days that followed were a storm Indigo had braced for. But nothing could have prepared her for the weight of watching the world finally see her father for who he really was. News outlets scrambled for interviews, podcasts dissected every detail of the exposé, and victims she had never met began reaching out with stories that mirrored the same darkness. Indigo didn't hide. She stepped forward. Publicly. Her first interview aired 3 nights after the story broke. She sat under harsh studio lights, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. When asked why she chose to go public, she answered plainly, "Because silence protects power, and I was done protecting the wrong people." Martin, meanwhile, was unraveling. He issued a cold, carefully worded denial, then disappeared from public life. Investors withdrew. A board vote was held. And within 2 weeks, he was removed from his own company. The empire he had spent decades building began to crack, brick by brick, as Indigo's truth echoed louder with each passing day. Cole reached out once, just a text. "You've ruined everything." She stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. If everything meant the illusion, then yes, she had shattered it on purpose. But as the media storm quieted, a different silence returned. The kind that whispered in moments alone, when the adrenaline wore off. Indigo realized exposing the truth didn't heal every wound, it just lit the path forward. Therapy sessions became weekly. She revisited her mother's journal often, not to relive the pain, but to remind herself of the strength that came from speaking first. Violet stayed close, her presence a constant reminder that family is not blood. It is truth, loyalty, and the refusal to look away. One evening, Indigo stood at the window of her apartment, watching the city lights flicker like tiny confessions in the dark. She whispered, not to anyone in particular, but perhaps to her younger self, "You did it. You got out." And then, to the silence, she promised, "I will never let it happen again." She had started as the girl with the wine glass and the trembling hands. Now she was the woman who lit the match and watched the lie burn down to its last ash. 6 months later, Indigo stood on the steps of a women's advocacy center, a building newly renamed in her mother's honor, the Alara Foundation. The air was brisk, spring just arriving, and the media frenzy had long since faded. But what remained was more powerful than headlines: momentum. Indigo had turned pain into purpose. She worked quietly now, helping other women find safe exits, funding legal support, and telling her story when it mattered. She no longer needed applause, just progress. Inside, she passed a framed photo of her mother and Violet, now restored from the shadows of family denial. Every hallway whispered resilience, but even in victory, Indigo carried the weight of those who didn't make it, those who stayed quiet too long, those who were never believed. That grief did not go away. It became her fuel. She occasionally saw Cole in the news, now leading a restructured Jordan group under a new name, giving speeches on transparency. He never spoke to her again. Martin, last she heard, had moved overseas. The world moved on quickly, but Indigo had not forgotten. She never would. One night, back in her apartment, she opened the last page of her mother's journal. A note she'd missed the first time stared back. "To my daughter, if you ever read this, please live loudly." Indigo smiled. That legacy, at least, was safe now. The story doesn't end with one headline. It continues with every woman who dares to speak, to break the silence, to refuse the script written for her. Indigo's journey lit the way, but she was never the last spark. If this story moved you, share it. And if you've ever found your voice after being silenced, drop A in the comments and tell someone, you're not alone, because every truth deserves to be heard. And every voice, one by one, changes the world. Ah!